dear Chairman. I'm deeply honored to speak here today on behalf of our foundation, Justice for Journalists. And I would like to speak about its role of in fighting impunity for the crimes against media workers around the world. As an introduction, let me briefly say a few words about the Justice for Journalists Foundation and how it came around. I will show a few slides if I'm able to share my screen. Yes, I am. So yes, so I am basically I would like to talk today about start with the history of Justice for Journalists Foundation. Our organization was founded just over 3 years ago when 3 Russian journalists were murdered in the Central African Republic while investigating Wagner, a private Russian mercenary group that is believed to be connected to Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close associate of Russian President Putin and the head of the infamous troll factory. Our founders are Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Leonid Nevzin, former Russian businessmen and also political prisoners. Mikhail was political prisoner, obviously, who were funding this investigation as well as many others, other media projects in Russia and abroad. They were deeply shocked by that crime and especially by the lack of investigation and of any desire to investigate this crime by the authorities of either Russia or Central African Republic. They were made basically to launch and fund their own independent investigation into this crime. And while researching the situation, they realized that such crime is not as far from being a one-off, that the violent crimes against media are indeed a global problem. So violence with the aim to silence journalists can take many forms, and it is usually the responsibility of the states who are signatories of various conventions and charters to provide safety of journalists, to uphold and foster media freedom. However, currently we see many countries in the world failing to fulfill their obligations to sustain freedom of speech and protect the independent media. So approximately at the same time when this crime took place, in summer of 2018, I was finalizing my master thesis in one of the London universities. And my thesis was about security and intelligence, namely about Soviet and Russian active measures as a tool of the Kremlin's and when my thesis in one of the London universities and my thesis idea of the foundation, I have managed to persuade them that its activities should not only concern investigative grants, but also it was extremely important to educate as many journalists as possible about the specific risks that they face during their work and to teach them how to assess these risks and how to defend themselves. And therefore, we came with the 3 main components for the foundation's activities. Namely, first of them is issuing investigative grants to the media to investigate crimes against journalists around the world. Second component is media safety and risk assessment trainings for media workers. This mainly concerns Russian-speaking media workers. And third is media risks monitoring. Again, the third component is mainly about the Russian-speaking part of the world, namely the 12 post-Soviet countries. And the third component is mainly here on the third slide, I have this, namely the 12 post-Soviet countries. And the third component is mainly here on the workers today around the world. We can see here that out of 1,416 murders of media workers since 1992, the impunity rate remains at 90%. In other words, only 1 out of 10 crimes against journalists gets fully investigated. And it is important to understand that this number has nothing to do with the competence and training of the law enforcement bodies and judiciary in relevant countries. Unfortunately, very often it is the leaders of those de facto authoritarian regimes who are the most willing to hide the truth by silencing the journalists. And nowadays, more reporters are being killed or attacked for covering their communities, cities, and countries than for reporting in armed zones. Corruption, populism, financial crimes, diminishing accountability by the authorities create numerous challenges and risks that both professional and citizen journalists are facing today. These facts formed a basis on which we built our first and main component of the foundation's work, and that is the investigative, that's issuing grants for journalistic investigations into the crimes against media workers. This is the work that's being conducted around the world, and you can see here on this slide the list of countries that we have covered in the 3 years of our work. We have allocated funds for 53 projects, and it's roughly 1.3 million US dollars. And the projects that are successfully fulfilled and completed, 12 of those are completed. So the benefit of the foundation, that the journalists who work with the foundation get from our funding, is that we don't pressure them for time. They can really conduct this investigation, provide quality work in whatever time it takes to finalize the investigation. And I will, of course, leave it to Sonia Winterberg to talk in detail about one of those successful investigations that became possible thanks to our support, and I'm sure you will find it fascinating. But today I was also asked to talk a little bit about another component of our work, which is media risk map, and I will show you on the screen how it looks, or you can check out on the website. On our website is jfj.fund. Basically the goal of this media risk map is to monitor the attacks, the various types of attacks against media workers that take place in the post-Soviet space. There are many, not many, but quite a few human rights and other NGOs that monitor media freedom around the world, and some of them do record the attacks against media workers in various countries. But probably due to the language problems, there was no one out there who was systematically monitoring the attacks against journalists in the post-Soviet space. We in the foundation therefore undertook that task, and we have data now from the beginning of 2017 from the 12 post-Soviet states, where we monitor on the daily basis the various types of attacks that take place there. So I will very briefly present you with the most recent figures that I hope you might find helpful, and that would also enable you to take a little break from listening to me speaking. So I will show you some of the figures that basically speak for themselves. This is the trend that you can see, the amount of the number of attacks from 2017 to 2020, combined in 12 post-Soviet countries, excluding obviously the Baltic states that are part of the European Union now. You can see the trend is not, is basically is positive in terms of the numbers, but negative in terms of the meaning of this situation. And in 2021, we already have, in first 10 months, we already have more attacks than in 2020. We can see that this basically the goal of that exercise of having all the attacks calculated, analyzed, and put on the website for everyone to see is to make the media workers aware of the kinds of the types of risks and the kinds of attacks that happen in these countries, and to make sure that they are already more ready to undertake their job when they travel there, or when they deal with these countries. Our findings can be found on our website, and they're also summarized in our annual reports, also available on our website in both English and Russian, and they are available in the country languages as well. So I would like to introduce a few findings from this work that summarize the trends of the last 4 years. And the first slide I would like to show you again, this is the combined number from all the 12 countries. You can see the number of arrests of journalists increasing. So the darker part is 2017, the lighter part on top is the number of arrests in 2020 of journalists, specifically media workers and journalists. By media workers, we mean also the photographers, operators, documentary makers. So it's a slightly larger number of people than just writing or broadcast journalists. This is what concerns to arrests, lawsuits and trials against journalists. Again, here we see the trend is basically a threefold growth since 2017 in 2020. And yes, majority of the countries responsible for that trend in majority of cases are Russia and Belarus and Kazakhstan, but still the number is quite significant. In terms of the non-fatal physical assaults, we unfortunately see growth here as well. Same can be said about cyber attacks. But here, of course, we know that in majority of cases, journalists do not report these attacks because they consider them to be part of their work, and vast majority of those type of attacks remain underreported. One of the trends we highlight in our report is who are the perpetrators, who are the initiators of those attacks against media workers. And again, on this graph, you can see 5 countries where the darker shaded blue part of the circle is the other cases when the authorities or representatives of the authorities are behind those attacks. And you can see here, of course, in Belarus, Azerbaijan, Russia, Uzbekistan, the situation is quite dire. It's more than 70%. So Ukraine is actually not that bad in this respect. Another trend that I would like to mention is that it's like a worrying trend. It's not the most common, but it is increasing. It is a tried and tested Soviet anti-dissident method of forced incarceration in psychiatric institutions of journalists and other dissidents. And since 2017, Justice for Journalists Foundation recorded 10 attacks of this type in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Crimea, and Russia. In these regions, and here, unfortunately, Ukraine is one of those regions where independent journalists are increasingly subjected to the systematic persecution with the use of the tools from 2 or more categories of assaults. So we see countries like Azerbaijan, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan who practice systematic hybrid attacks against single-out journalists using a variety of different types of persecution. That could be a lawsuit, that could be physical assault, cyber attack at the same time. So basically, as a result of this kind of pressure, media workers often are being forced to quit the profession, leave the country altogether, or even succumbing to intolerable pressure, take their own life, as the Irina Slavin on this left picture here, who was subjected to many years of various bullying and harassment techniques on behalf of the Russian authorities, and took her own life in summer last year. The other person on the same slide is Azerbaijani investigative journalist Khadija Ismailova. She's also one of the most well-known victims. Thankfully she's alive and well, but she's one of the victims of this hybrid attacks conducted in Azerbaijan and outside of it. Over the last 10 years, she was threatened, harassed, attacked, and sent to prison for her work in pursuing the truth about the Azerbaijani government. In 2011, after the publication of Panama Papers, a secret camera was installed in her house and videos recorded were used to blackmail her. She also most recently, she was revealed to be one of the 180 journalists worldwide targeted by the infamous Pegasus spyware developed by NSO group in Israel. So these are the kind of main types of attacks, and here you can see on this next slide the comparison in absolute values of the number of attacks between 2019 and 2020. And here you see the Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. And of course, again, I underline that these are the absolute values. So you can see that Belarus, that is by far the smallest in terms of population, has the largest numbers of attacks, especially of the judicial attacks against journalists in 2020. And Ukraine, you can see the situation is not as bad as in its neighboring countries, but still the non-physical attacks and threats are quite significant and have grown almost twofold. We have recorded in 2020, we have recorded 422 instances of attacks and threats in relation to professional and citizen media workers and editorial offices in Ukraine. This is 2020, we don't have the numbers for this current year yet. And the most widespread method of pressure on media workers in Ukraine remains non-physical attacks, as you can see. These are kind of illegal impediments to journalistic activity and denial of access to information. And popular ways of intimidating and exacting revenge on journalists remain arson or damage to their dwellings and automobiles. Ukraine is also, as I mentioned before, is unfortunately in the group of countries where physical attacks on media workers are highly pervasive. 74 incidents were recorded in 2020, which exceeds the 2019 number by 19%. However, in the more positive terms, unlike the other countries of the region, in Ukraine, representatives of state structures played the role of aggressors, the perpetrators behind the attack, basically, in only one incident out of every 3, so the third of the incidents. Whereas in other countries, you could see that it's more than 75%. And also, I wanted to mention that in Ukraine in 2020, we have registered 81 hybrid attacks, of which 45 were committed against 10 journalists. And here you can see them on the slide. It's a little bit smallish figures, but you can see it's 10 journalists subjected to this hybrid attacks. So various types of attacks, physical combined with judicial and economic attacks. Yes, it's basically probably my time is up, and I think that's mostly what I wanted to say about our work and about the data that we collect. And I'm not going to speak about the media safety trainings that we conduct as our third field of activity today. But thank you very much for listening to me. And if you do have any questions after this roundtable, we would be happy to answer them. You can either find the answers on our website or just write to us directly, and we will be happy to communicate. Thank you very much for your attention.